Good morning. It's been a while since I've done this, and I gotta say it looks weird. It looks like I'm going bald, but that's because all my hair's being yanked back in a tail, because otherwise it would be in my face. Um, so if you're going from the last chapter to this chapter, there's going to be a few changes, I'm sure, but that's only because a couple months have passed since I last read. And yes, today is a reading video. I'm reading to you from The Day We Said Goodbye, a meditation on acceptance by me. And today we're reading chapter 2, which is titled, and on top of that, My Father's Dying, July 11th, 2008, so 12 years ago. So let's continue, shall we? Have you spoken to Blanche? I talked to her. Oh God, I'm not going to cut that out. This is what happens when you haven't read in a while. Have you spoken to Blanche? I just talked to her. Dad's really bad. The tone of my brother's voice conveyed everything I'd been expecting. Only I hadn't been expecting it to be conveyed to me. At least, not yet. Richard, my youngest brother, hadn't even bothered with small talk when he called. He just jumped right into Dad's really bad. While he didn't come right out and say anything, I understood the purpose of it, or the purpose to it, excuse me. After all, I lived in Southern California, in Anaheim. Dad lived with his wife Blanche in Chandler, Arizona. Richard lived in Bellevue, Washington, and Dwight, my second youngest brother, had recently moved to North Carolina. Keith, my older brother, had just moved to Vancouver in southern Washington, and my sister Audrey was, well, I wasn't exactly talking to her. That was my family. If anyone was going to hop in their car and check on my dad, it would be me. And I won't lie here, there was something gratifying about that. I mean, I might have been the closest of my father's children geographically, but I harbored no illusions about being closest to him emotionally. Our relationship had never really worked out that way. We were always too busy trying to outwit each other, outquip each other. I don't know, avoid each other? Maybe. It just never really happened the way I hoped. Maybe the way he hoped, too. So I was kind of glad to be the one who got the call to go out there. The next morning, I packed up an overnight bag, a backpack, basically. Even at 42, I was pretty young back then, I hadn't quite graduated to proper luggage. Don't ask about me now. My wife, Vicky, couldn't make it out with me. She was in the middle of a work project. I could tear myself away from work with no problem, but Vicky was actually invested in her job. She was good at her job. She wasn't some marketing writer who was waiting for one of his books to get published so he could quit a marketing career that was going nowhere and actually start living the life he had worked so hard to begin. That was me. Vicky gave me a kiss, nestled and half asleep in our bed, and I walked out into the half-light of dawn. At 5 a.m., I wanted to get out before the heat of the Arizona summer sun baked me like some exotic cannibal's delight. I pulled out onto the 91 freeway, popped an Al Stewart disc into my CD player. Yes, I'm old. Made my way out towards Riverside, where I could merge onto the 10 freeway and take that all the way to Phoenix, and stopped in the middle of freeway construction. The 10 was being widened or engorged or something, but only one lane each way was open to allow for traffic to pass. I guess they decided to do this on a weekend when there would be less traffic. Only the construction crews forgot this was Southern California, where there was no such thing as less freeway traffic ever. And so I sat and sat and sat. I didn't get to Arizona until sometime in the evening, after the summer sun had spent all of its energy wasting my air conditioner and hung drooping in the western sky. Somewhere in California, Vicky was probably watching that sunset and thinking I already was at my dad's house. I didn't call her, though I had just had a new hands-free system for my phone installed in my car. It was some time ago. Something about this whole trip felt very private, and I just didn't want to talk about it at the time. I stepped out into the evening sauna, having parked my car on the street, and walked up to my father's door. Though my dad and Blanche had lived in this house for quite a while, it didn't feel like very long to me, only a few years. I remembered Blanche telling me and Vicky about how they chose the plants for the front of their house. They couldn't have a lawn in the middle of the desert, or they could, and they were wise enough not to try it. So they chose some drought-resistant plants. It all seemed unreal, in a way, walking up their front path now that my father was dying. I knocked on the door and hoped no one was home. Wouldn't that have been easier? So sorry I missed you. I guess you were out at the movies or spelunking or something. I wished. I had known my father was sick for quite a while. Along with the rest of the family, I had read all the email updates on his condition, talked about it on the phone, had shared rumors and guesses. Point of fact, I knew, but I didn't want to know. I didn't want to be a part of it. Blanche opened the door with her fingers to her lips and directed me to the kitchen. Their home was a cozy 2-bedroom affair. It might have been 3 bedrooms, but one room was used as an office. It was the kind of small home 2 people buy to grow old together in. My dad was old, but he certainly wasn't old enough to be dying, not in this day and age. He had just turned 70. And okay, he had lived with diabetes and high blood pressure and arthritis and a score of other aches and ailments, but he had managed it all just fine. Blanche was 10 years younger, and with her short, light brown hair and generous smile, didn't look a day over 50. "What's going on?" I asked. "Your father just got to sleep." I didn't want to wake him. He's been having such a hard time sleeping lately. I try to let him get his rest whenever he can, she whispered. And this is especially funny considering the last few nights I've been doing the insomnia shift. I gave her a nod and she gave me a hug, and we both leaned on their kitchen counter and talked. I asked her how she was doing, and she told me about the difficulties she faced maintaining some balance between work and home while taking care of my father. He had once simply been what you might call ailing. But more and more, it was clear he was dwindling. She showed me a laundry list of medications and doctor reports and appointments and suggestions. What did it all come down to? Well, that's the strangest thing. They all say he's healthy, that he's perfectly healthy, Blanche said. She spoke with the sarcastic kind of laugh of a person who had seen enough idiot doctors. Clearly, my father was not healthy. He couldn't eat or keep food down when he did eat. He wasted away more and more until he weighed less than 100 pounds. He experienced dizziness, trouble swallowing, convulsions, and on and on and on. Despite the idiot doctors, he was not healthy. I gave Blanche a hug, which wasn't much, but it was all I could think of at that moment. I couldn't bear to see the torment beneath her always kindly face. Blanche always smiles for people, but my father's sickness was eating at her too. I hugged her, and she hugged me back. It was a nice feeling. Let me tell you something about Blanche. It's my favorite memory of her. This goes back to the early 1980s when I was trying to write my first book. I was living with them then, the side of my family that consisted of my dad, Blanche, Dwight, and Richard, for about a month. We lived out in the desert city of Bloomington, California. In my bedroom, Blanche or my dad had set up a little desk where I could put my typewriter. Yes, it was that long ago. And I did my best to carve out my first novel, to learn what it meant to be a writer. I was 16 years old, which is almost 40 years ago. A few weeks later, we were visiting some of Blanche's family in Huntington Beach. I had given Blanche a few pages of the novel to read, and she was kind enough to take a few moments out of her visit. I was too young to understand how much that meant at the time, or how to better time my requests, for that matter. And she sat with me and read the pages. And my wife is coming down the stairs. I can hear her footsteps. Hi, what you doing?
I need coffee
Okay.
and breakfast.
Okay. I've started the camera again. Vicky just came down to get a little bagel, and I've asked her to hold on, so there's proof of her existence. Vicky, you really exist, right? I'm actually married to somebody, and you're real and a
Yes.
person.
Yes.
See,
Yes, you are.
she's right
I am real.
over there.
I am real. Love you.
So, I love you. So she's gone, and we can keep reading. Eventually, she's going to get on camera. She just doesn't know it yet. So, back to Blanche. Her reading stopped at a certain passage. Her reading stopped at a certain passage, and she laughed just a little bit. I, of course, was immediately offended because I was a teenager. Okay, so you should know that I am notoriously thin-skinned, the book says. Some of my family can be very sensitive, overly sensitive, and I'm not immune to that. Hell, I could take blue ribbons. My novel was not a comedy by any means, and there Blanche sat, laughing at it. But then she looked at me with a smile, and she read the passage that had brought such mirth. Raphael walked into his study, the plush carpet a foot thick. She asked, "Did you mean for the carpet to be a foot thick?" "I guess," I told her with that teenager's attempt at plausible deniability. "The thing is," she said, "carpet is usually less than an inch thick." "But I wanted it to be really thick," I told her. She gave me a nod and smiled again. "Okay then," she said. "But you might want to make it a little less thick when you rewrite it." Now, I didn't know anything about rewrites back then. I knew as much about writing as I knew about carpeting. But what I did know was that nobody had ever been interested in my writing before. My mom discouraged me. My dad ignored me. Blanche was, in a very real sense, my very first fan. She read everything back then and encouraged me. And when I made a goof, and I made more than my share of goofs, she let me know in the kindest fashion imaginable. I loved Blanche in a way that was foreign to me, not because I had to because she was my family, but because I wanted to because she was kind to me. And I couldn't bear to see her kindness submerged in the sadness of my father's illness. With our embrace over, she asked me what had been going on in my life. I told her about my wife, Vicky, who you just met, about her wonderful job and about my horrible one, about my recent return to playwriting, and all of my attempts at selling my books. I wished I could tell her something really good, something that would encourage my dad and make him feel better in his misery. But I didn't have anything. All I had was my sarcasm and my humor. So I joked about how rotten things were and got her to smile. We shared a sandwich and realized the hour was growing late. I told her I'd see my dad in the morning and went to bed. Bed meant the futon in the spare room. Blanche had been kind enough to set it up, make it with sheets and blankets, and adorn it with pillows so I'd be comfortable. But I just kicked off my shoes and laid down on top of the blankets, still dressed. I don't know why, but I wanted to be ready in case anything happened. I called Vicky and told her about my trip. We whispered, me because I didn't want to disturb my dad, which was unlikely in their small house. Unlikely even in their small house. And Vicky because she had been sleeping. It was nearly 11 p.m. But the sound of her voice refreshed me, washed away my sadness and exhaustion, up until the point where she said, "I've got nothing else. I need to go to sleep." Say what you want about my wife. She is a true romantic. "Okay," I whispered. "I love you." "Are you coming home tomorrow?" she asked. "Of course," I told her. "I've got to go to work on Monday." "Yeah," she said. "I'm sorry about that." I worked at a company called D-Link, and my particular job was the kind where my boss took credit for everything I did, periodically took me into the conference room, closed the door, and screamed at me, and told me every hour or so to look busy. To me, it was a little slice of hell. "Me too," I said. She spoke in a fading voice. "I love you. Good night." "Good night," I said. And then, slowly, gradually, stayed awake all night long. I'm what you might call an insomniac. My wife calls it really, holy crap, is he an insomniac? In short, I don't sleep very often, still, to this day. How often? In a good week, I probably average 5 hours a night for 5 nights out of the week. That's a really good week. That's five hours for 5 nights out of a week. I would take that. Of course, when my stress level goes up, my sleep level dips down. Between my job, my dad dying, and my inability to make my dreams of being a writer come true, the math gets tricky. So, I walked their house in the middle of the night, looking at their DVD collection and trying out their sofa. I caught about an hour of sleep there in the morning and woke to find my dad watching TV on the recliner. Actually, I think he was sleeping too. Blanche came by and said, "Don't worry, your dad likes to sleep and watch the news. If you want to go back to sleep, go ahead." I did go back to sleep, and I awoke at around noon. Blanche and I had a little lunch. She tried to get Dad to eat, and as I was watching her trying to take care of him, I couldn't handle it. The emotional cocktail of watching your dad die is a potent one. And I did something inexcusable, if perhaps forgivable. I said, "Listen, I need to go for a walk." I stepped out before either of my folks had a chance to respond. And I scrammed. In the heat of the July afternoon, I hurried to the corner. I stopped and realized what I had done. I had almost literally run away. Boy, I said to myself, aren't you something? I knew I had to do something. I had to have some reason for being out there, so I called Vicky. "What's up?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "I was just out for a walk." Her tone was incredulous. Now? She knew what July afternoons in Arizona were like. I tried to explain why walking on the surface of the sun, or what they call shade, in Arizona was better than facing my ailing dad. "He's just a shell of his former self," I said. And he was. My dad had always been such a robust man, fat even. Some of this is hard to read. I think about my dad often, and I don't think about this part. So you'll forgive me if I'm a little slow. I read it, and then I have to internalize it, and then I have to speak it. So I apologize. Seeing him on that recliner, unwilling to eat. I don't know if I'll ever adequately be able to express how I felt. It wasn't the first time I'd faced this situation. Sean's wife, Megan, had passed away only a couple of years before in a similar manner. In her case, leukemia had led to graft versus host and month after month of slow, wasting death. As she grew smaller and smaller and weaker, I tried to keep Sean's spirits up. It was the only way I knew to help. But this was my father. We all knew he was dying. It scared the hell out of me. When I went back to their house, Blanche had moved my dad to the bed. She said, "He understood you had to go out for a cigarette." "For a cigarette?" I asked. "I didn't go out for a cigarette. I wish I'd gone out for a cigarette." Though I'd smoked for many years, I had actually stopped smoking the Christmas before and was trying to keep to that. When I said I was going out for a walk, I actually just went out for a walk, I said. With my father in his bed, Blanche and I watched a little bit of television as the afternoon turned to evening. I knew I'd have to leave once the sun went down. I had a long drive home. Before it was too late, Blanche asked, "Do you want to say goodbye to your father?" Those words, "say goodbye to your father," meant more than just a simple "see you later, Dad." I could feel it coming through her words. The time had come for me to say goodbye, to really say goodbye. I said sure, or something equally stupid, and we both went into the bedroom. "Keith," Blanche said. My father's name is Keith, the same as my brother. "Ken wants to say goodbye." My dad muttered something, and that sounded to me like the sound of heartbreak. because my father's voice had always been such a clear baritone, a granite baritone. His was the kind of voice I had always had a hard time arguing with. Back then, it was a good thing I had sarcasm. "Son," he finally said to me. "Dad," I said. I was mentally kicking myself. Say something, I thought. Say something meaningful, something you've always wanted to say. This is your chance. I could count the times I had shared with my father when I had the opportunity to speak without being interrupted. Now I could finally do it. I could speak without being interrupted. I could tell him about the memories I had from childhood when he would bring home cardboard boxes and we would color them with crayons to look like cars. And then we would climb inside of them, our heads sticking out the holes that we cut, and race around the living room. I could tell him about how much I cherished that. I could tell him, or I could let him know that no matter how much we disagreed on, and we disagreed on a lot, believe me, I appreciated the times we had together when we didn't disagree. That time as a teenager when I'd gone on a picnic with him and his family up in the mountains and he'd let me go explore. Or that time as an adult when he'd found me reading the Communist Manifesto, him a hard-nosed conservative and me an equally hard-nosed liberal. And instead of getting into some political debate, we just joked about it. Or that time. Or that time. How much those times meant to me. There was so much I could say. The words that came out of my mouth were something stupid, like, "I'll see you soon." And then I didn't even have the guts to embrace him because I was afraid of him. I was afraid of his death. And that was all he had become to me, as if my father wasn't even there. My father had been transformed into a 4-story neon billboard that reads, "You don't get this. You missed out." I drove home with my tail between my legs. I couldn't even tell Vicky what I'd done. I was so ashamed of myself. I felt certain that I'd missed my one chance to say goodbye to my father, to truly let him go. And in so doing, to honestly share in his life. And that was chapter 2 of The Day We Said Goodbye, A Meditation on Acceptance by me, Ken LaSalle. I'll come back again soon with another chapter. And until then, be good to yourself, be kind to others, and let's make this world a better place. I'll see you soon. And that's it. Thanks for coming around, and I hope you subscribe, click the like button, and connect with me on all that social media business on the screen.